There is uncertainty on Hernandez's future because he was caught in Mexico, particularly when it comes to whether or not Hernandez will remain in custody there or if he will be extradited back to the United States. To explain some of these complexities, we are joined now by Neama Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor who has experience prosecuting border crimes. Neama, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Well, Cesar Hernandez was in jail for murder in Delano. Of course, and then he escaped to Mexico, where he killed a law enforcement officer there. And he was just, of course, caught today, or yesterday, rather. What do you think the chances are for extradition?
Rochelle, very likely. And I've handled these types of cases, escapees from Kern County who flee to Mexico. And normally they're extradited to the United States rather quickly. The U.S. and Mexico have had an extradition treaty for quite some time. So the request is made to the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. They contact the Mexican consulate and the process begins. But here, of course, Hernandez killed a Mexican police officer. So I believe the process will be delayed. I expect Hernandez to be prosecuted in Mexico, potentially even incarcerated there, and then when he serves his time, he'll return to the United States. But one way or another, I expect there to be a prosecution and a conviction in Mexico, even if he ends up serving the 80 to life and additional time, of course, for escaping. That's a both state and federal crime as well, so that time will be tacked on. One way or another, though, I do believe that trial will happen in Mexico before he's extradited.
And what are some of the complications in extraditing someone back to the U.S.? Does Hernandez have the same due process rights in Mexico as he does here?
Well, there are due process rights. It is a little bit different. Two big differences with the Mexican criminal justice system is they don't have a right to a jury trial. Those decisions are made by judges. And the right to, bail and, not being detained pre-trial is not as expansive over there. So oftentimes detainees aren't in custody. They're not out on bond, especially someone like him, obviously. He's a risk of flight. He's a danger to the community. He's now been involved in 2 murders. I expect him to be detained regardless of where he is in the United States or Mexico. But those are key differences between the U.S. and Mexican criminal justice systems.
Now, if he does come back to the U.S., he has to face new charges. Any insight into what he may face? And does it matter since he was already sentenced to 80 years to life?
It's not going to matter for all intents and purposes. Here's someone who is now involved in a second murder, but escape under state law is a 4-year additional sentence potential, and if there's force involved, 6 years. So that would be tacked on if and when he's convicted of the escape.
All right. How is this case similar to maybe even previous cases that you've prosecuted before?
And I've handled a lot of cases. I've extradited drug cartel members accused of drug and human trafficking. Oftentimes, when people flee to Mexico, they don't commit additional murders there in Mexico. And obviously someone, when they have their back up against the wall and they have nothing to lose, they may do this. But typically, when you're dealing with murderers, they're usually a murderer in one country. You don't see people going to another country and committing these types of murders because, again, they're trying to lay low and escape. But ultimately, I'm surprised he wasn't killed in that shootout and he was apprehended.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. But thank you again, Neama, for joining us and all of your insight. We do appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Rochelle.
All right. Take care.